modeling success in terms of the creative entrepreneur's journey, utilized in terms of health and wellness, in terms of their topping up their creative well, but also their energetic well, that allows them to do what they're best at for a very extended period of time.
Podcasters CoLab conversation with Joshua Sparks, Healthspan practitioner and former leader of Sass and Bide and New York's Thom Browne, and the host of Led Well Live Well, international facilitator, 6-time CEO and leadership expert, Mark Bilton.
Healthspan, to my mind, is optimizing. Well, optimizing Healthspan is optimizing the time, but Healthspan itself is the time in your life that you would consider in your terms that you are capable of enjoying life the way you want to.
Josh and Mark are podcasters and leadership experts as well as good friends. Here, in our end-of-year special collab, they have a conversation on their passions for Healthspan, purpose and what it means to be human and live well.
You can lift a depressed person's perceived sense of well-being, but also the observed levels of serotonin in the brain by making them smile.
You know, people talk about the social connection. If you look at all the blue zones where people live for a longer life, they all have this sort of social component. They eat together or they commune together. Or what's the mechanism that actually brings extra health span based on social connection?
But that's where I lean more into science. Yeah. And there are certain things that science has gifted us with that I think are worth exploring if you are interested in taking it to that level.
Josh Sparks.
Mark Bilton.
So good to see you. We're going to do something different today. This is not my podcast or your podcast. This is a collab between
it's a whole new thing.
You and I. Really enjoyed last time you came down. We talked a lot about your branding, your business, but we started to get into the sort of health and wellness side of things. Love to spend some more time talking about that.
Great.
And congratulations on your new podcast.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
You inspired me.
Did I?
You did.
You've gone beyond me, mate. The productivity in that is fantastic. Some great people.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about that journey and how you got into it.
Well, quite honestly, I was inspired by you and Dane Walker, who we both know with his podcast,
He's
The Agency. And it really stemmed from wanting to engage in these kind of conversations from a bit of a selfish perspective. My curiosity is not always easily sated. And we so rarely sit down and have 90-minute, 2-hour conversations with people we find. It's a rare privilege to be able to do that.
Totally.
And I really enjoyed our time together on your podcast. I really enjoyed the time I spent with Dane and with Dylan Mullen and others. And so I think it was initially, at least, this is going to be something I want to do for me, meeting people who I find genuinely inspiring and interesting, and hopefully share some of their worldly wisdom with an audience. And of course, there is a hope that it might be able to introduce me to new clients and bring new work to my coaching business. But ultimately, even if that doesn't go as far as I would like it to, it's already happened a little bit, but even if it doesn't eventuate in a big way, I'm meeting really interesting people and having the kind of conversations you don't normally have the opportunity to have, even with close friends.
Yeah. There's always, I've had a lot of people in here who I know managed to entice down to the Southern Highlands, the promise of lunch.
It's a good lunch.
It's always a good lunch. And absolutely. You learn things about people because you don't often have, even with close friends, like what are you passionate about? Tell us about your business. Like you don't really have that depth of conversation. So you do learn something every time.
Yes.
And you toured into the US and the production values, I have to say, world class.
Oh, thank you.
World class.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to, I guess, turn the absence of a studio like this into a virtue, not a vice. So going on the road and shooting on location in people's homes and studios has been really fun. It's another angle on their world.
Yeah.
They feel really comfortable. So particularly with people I don't know well, it's their environment. So I think that's made a difference. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. For people that don't know what you're doing, do you want to just give us an idea of the types of people? Because you've got some world-class people there as well. I
think it's a celebration of the creative journey. I'm speaking to people who are creative entrepreneurs that have managed to pursue a creative vision, create some cultural impact, but commercialize it in a way that it's not a hobby. And in some instances, very substantial businesses. So I'm particularly fascinated by how creatives work with people like us to commercialize their vision without diluting it to the point that it loses the magic that was their intention in the first place. So I'm interested in those, and that's why the cultural impact piece is really important, because there's a lot of great businesses out there that have a creative element and are commercially successful, but I don't think necessarily are making the kind of cultural impact that I find most inspiring.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of the creative entrepreneurs themselves, the people that they work with, health and wellness professionals, psych professionals, who help them to be at their best as consistently as possible. And then also some really interesting that I would say are in that group of supporters of creatives, but perhaps not someone that would immediately come to mind, like Lara Day, who is an intuitive, a psychic, as many people would call it, but she doesn't like that word because she thinks psychic is woo-woo and intuitive is data.
Intuitives get paid more.
Well, she's got a very lucrative practice.
Intuitively.
Because she delivers. Yep. So I think it's about modeling success in terms of the creative entrepreneur's journey, but then those who can sustain it over decades typically have practices that they utilize in terms of health and wellness, in terms of their topping up their creative well, but also their energetic well, that allows them to do what they're best at for a very extended period of time.
It's a hard transition, isn't it? For like a creative, organizing business and growing business and scale is not necessarily aligned with that skill set.
No. And I think it's often the downfall of what could otherwise be great brands or great businesses is that there is a misunderstanding. Where does that bullseye lie between that, that creative vision and the commercialization, with cultural impact being, hopefully a subset of that. Yeah. That bullseye is really hard to navigate to. And typically the creative needs a partner. I was interviewing Samantha Wells, who had her eponymous jewelry line, Samantha Wells Jewelry. She chose to walk away at the height of its success and reinvent as a writer and speaker and evangelist for female entrepreneurs around the world. She's an incredibly creative, talented and driven individual. And she gives so much credit to her business partner, Jeff, because she's, without Jeff creating the commercial structure around what I was doing, I wouldn't have made it. Yeah.
And the highlight would be Thom.
Well, Thom Browne, who I worked with as CEO for a little while and is a dear friend. It was great to sit down with him. In many ways, it was a highlight to be able to do it with him.
He doesn't do it very often, does he?
No, very rarely.
It's pretty private.
Very private. And in fact, that was one of the challenges in the interview, because I know him so well. I kept wanting to go into stories that, he for whatever reason, and understandably, he didn't want to share with the world. So sometimes it's more fun interviewing someone you know well, and sometimes it's much harder. Yeah. Because you realize you're not there to share all the intimate stories they might have shared with you in a private setting. Yeah. It's a different thing.
Yeah. Fine boundaries, aren't they?
Yes.
Because you really want people to share deeply and be reasonably vulnerable and open. Yes. But only things that they're willing to put out into the public domain. It's only you and I here today, Josh. No one's watching. So, we can
completely vulnerable.
We can get into it.
Completely vulnerable.
We can get into it. Any other highlights for you? Any other people that you really enjoyed spending time with?
I've loved them all. And there's been a really broad spectrum. I mean, John Rose, who ex-professional surfer and founder of the humanitarian organization Waves for Water. But we focused on
he's a unit too, isn't he?
He's an incredibly impressive athlete, and just an incredibly impressive human. But we really focused on his journey of inner healing, psychotherapy, and psychedelic supported psychotherapy. So it was a very moving discussion and different in many ways to the one that I was expecting to have with him. So that was just a beautiful surprise. Yeah. But even, a couple of weeks ago, I was in New York and I sat down with Paisley Laura. She's a young entrepreneur, totally self-made. She's built a business. It's a CBD, so not THC, not the intoxicating side of cannabis, but CBD, which is the non-intoxicating, relaxing side of cannabis. So it's legal across the country. It's legal in Australia. It's legal in most places. And she's built a business about getting gooey. And the whole idea is this ritual of self-love and self-care. And she's got, 1 million followers on TikTok and whatever it is, 700,000 on Instagram. She was
we're working on those numbers, aren't we? We're in the ascendancy. We're in ascendancy.
Yeah. I get the 7. I just don't have the 100,000. But she was just a ball of energy, and it's always fantastic to sit down with a young entrepreneur who's early on in their journey and they're just after it.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I mean, most of my clients are more mature. They're going through that transition into something that's significant. Business has grown and they're going to get stuck. We help them out to get to that next level.
Yes.
But I still do love that whole entrepreneurial passion. Most of my guys are up 4 o'clock in the morning shouting at the sky and running half marathons and doing things while I'm sleeping. But just that level of energy and passion and drive, even after, some of them over a decade of hard graft, like hard entrepreneurial work that people don't talk about.
Yes.
Actually making a difference and doing their thing. They're fun. I love spending time with them.
Me too. And I think that drive, being able to sustain that over decades of ups and downs, because everyone from the outside thinks the graph only goes up and to the right on a consistent basis. And when you've gone through it yourself and you work with entrepreneurs, as you and I have for a long time, it's rarely a dream run. It's usually an incredibly challenging,
absolutely
constant existential risk. The mountain is very steep and treacherous. So to be able to sustain that for decades, I think speaks to the way they take care of themselves. And also, and we were touching on this before we started recording, that sense of higher purpose. Because it's not a job I can walk away from if it gets hard. This is it's almost an identity.
Absolutely.
This has to work.
Yeah. And the other side of that, when they're selling, they want to sell, but what am I going to do afterwards?
Yeah.
My whole identity is actually embedded in doing this, and there's some issues around that transition.
Who am I?
Who am I
if I don't do
without
this?
It's been my baby for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it takes 20 years to become an overnight success, as they say.
Indeed.
That's probably a good time to sort of transition into the whole health and wellness. And we touched on it last time that we met. This is your podcast as much as mine, by the way, so you can ask me questions. I'm just getting in. I'm just getting in first. And this is your area of expertise. You actually had a profound influence on me, would have been maybe 16, 17 years ago now, which is a long time. You're obviously about 20 at the time. Ross Lane of Origin fame introduced you, and you came along to a YPO lunch.
Yes.
And you talked about, back in those days, it was about paleo and fitness and the importance of Healthspan and a whole bunch of things. And although I felt I looked after myself okay, it really just challenged me. I need to go to another whole level at an age where, I'm well into my 60s now, but back then I'm going, okay, I need to really start to put things in my life that actually can help me look more like Josh. And sort of move to that. I want to be healthy. I want to be fit. I want to be strong. I want to have a healthy later life as well. And you really challenged me on that. So that actually had a profound impact on me. So I really respect your knowledge and your wisdom, and you've come a long way since then in deep diving into all these areas.
Thank you, Mark. That was an incredibly kind introduction to this topic, and I really appreciate the incredibly kind words. And I just want to comment as well, and this is not me just returning compliments. I mean, to think that you're in your 60s is ridiculous, because you don't look or act or have the energy of what we all. I
love hanging out with you, Josh.
But you know what I mean? Like the way we used to imagine 60s when I was growing up, 60s was grandpa. And it just doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. And you're a great example. So it's very, we have a lot more agency than I think we imagine over what aging needs to look like.
We do. And like turning 60 was a big milestone for me. I didn't want to do it, didn't want to celebrate it, like because of that kind of grandpa phase.
Yes.
And I really had to listen to my wife, which is a life lesson. I'm still learning that, but she's usually right. And she said, like, just get a grip on yourself. Like, it's just another year. You need to really sort of think about this next season of your life. I went, yeah, you know what? She's probably right. So I sort of dug down into that and went, okay, it's just another season. And you talk about sense of purpose. I try and have a sense of purpose whatever I'm doing at different seasons of my life. And so I had this sense of I've got 20 good summers left. Right? It's a rolling number, by the way. It's still 20 good summers, even 20. Though I've clocked up another few years, but it's still a rolling 20. And what can I do what do I have agency over where I can look after my body, look after my mental health, spiritual health, emotional health, relationships, sense of purpose, the things that I'm doing that I value, things that I'm doing that give me some peace and centering, but also contribute to other people. What's my responsibility in the midst of that? And so I really wrestled with it, embraced it, went, great, it's just another season. I got 20 good summers, and which Helen hates, by the way. She hates that as a phrase. But I've got 20 good summers. How can I maximize that?
Yes.
So, I think we've all got to find our own sense of, yes, we're aging. We're mortal. There's a day when we won't be here.
Yes.
And I started that journey and then immediately a year later had cranial surgery and was sort of out of action for 6 months and all the rest of it. So life does get in the way. But even in the midst of that, going into that, coming out of that, getting another round of sort of healing and back on track. It's life has its ups and downs, but I think a commitment to looking after yourself means you're available to look after other people. It's not selfish to look after number one, but you really have to be deliberate and think about it, particularly when you get a bit older.
You do. You do. There's a couple of things I want to touch on that you just brought up. First of all, your cranial surgery, which was, you were always incredibly optimistic about it whenever we spoke heading into that surgery. But at the same time, it was an existential risk if it hadn't been discovered when it was.
Absolutely.
And the surgery itself was not without risk. So you went into that in probably the best shape you've been in 30 years. So there's something about, yes, life gets in the way, but why not be in the best possible shape you can be in when life gets in the way?
Absolutely.
So if you're going to have a health crisis or a financial crisis or a relationship breakdown or any of the other things that happen, and there is a degree of luck in life, let's be honest, when those things happen, why not go into it in the best possible condition, as strong and as fit and as healthy as you can be? So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
You won't always be able to stay on track with whatever your plan is. And I want to come back to plan because that's critical as well. Your other point, you won't always be able to follow the plan perfectly for obvious reasons, make God laugh and all that stuff, telling you plans.
Yeah.
But you'll be your foundation, you're building on a foundation constantly. And if you come back a level, you're still coming back to a level higher than you would have been if you hadn't done the work.
Yeah.
And you bounce back faster, you recover faster, you're mentally more robust, you're emotionally more resilient. So for all those reasons, it makes sense to make this a practice.
Yeah, I love it. And you're more resilient, aren't you? I think there's some connection between, we tend to isolate the thinking, but there's a connection between physical health, mental health, energy, even spiritual connection and aptitude and energy. Like we're an integrated being, not just a bunch of separate things.
Can we just stop on that? Because that is incredibly important.
Okay.
Just what you just said is really important, because from the scientific method and the way we think about medicine in the West, which has been transformative in terms of disease control, surgical outcomes, all kinds of stuff. It's great.
Absolutely.
It's great. But what it encourages us to do is think of these bits as separate. So we see a cardiovascular surgeon, or we see a gastroenterologist, or we see that we start in our own minds compartmentalizing the body as if it was a bunch of different things. The brain, same thing. It's like as if the brain is somehow disconnected to the body, and we can have an unhealthy body but still expect our brain to perform the way we need it to perform intellectually, emotionally, and mentally.
Yeah.
You're in one bag of skin. It's all connected. And we can talk about the spiritual connection, which is perhaps beyond that later. But if we're talking about the physical realm, mental, emotional, physical, it's all connected.
Yeah.
So I pause on that point because I think it's easily overlooked.
It is. We tend to have the sort of Greek Western mindset of body is kind of inferior to the brain, but it's separate. But we are definitely an integrated whole.
Yes.
Can I just tap into some of your experience here? Because there'll be things that you think everybody knows that they probably don't. So if you think about some of those fundamental ways that we can look after ourselves, if we want a good health span, perhaps let's roll back a bit. Can you define health span for us and then come back to the key foundations?
Sure. So I think Healthspan, to my mind, is optimizing. Well, optimizing Healthspan is optimizing the time, but Healthspan itself is the time in your life that you would consider in your terms that you are capable of enjoying life the way you want to.
Okay.
So you have the physical health, you have the intellectual capabilities, you have the emotional control, emotional equilibrium is probably a better word, so that you can show up for yourself and for others the way that you want to. And everyone's got a different definition of that. So some people will say, Healthspan is, I still want to be able to hit the gym and lift weights 3 times a week. And if I can't do that and do it pain-free, that's, I'm outside my Healthspan. Others will say, I just want to be able to walk down and do the gardening. So everyone's got a different definition.
Okay. So you define it yourself.
It's functional health within your definition. Yep. But for most people, it would be going about day-to-day life without the need of mechanical or other human assistance, and to be able to live independently, pain-free or largely pain-free. Different to lifespan, of course. Mark Sisson has a nice sort of, metaphor that he uses. So he talks about squaring the curve. So if you imagine the traditional thinking around aging was at somewhere around about 50 or so, maybe mid-40s, maybe mid-50s, you'd be on this long gradual decline. And you could measure that decline in external ability, your sprint time, your lift capacity, your agility or flexibility. You could also measure it in a bunch of blood markers. So your healthy hormones would decline, the inflammatory hormones and cytokines would increase, et cetera, et cetera. So you can measure it a bunch of different ways, but you're on this one-way trip to the grave, and it's going to get progressively worse every year. Pretty depressing thought. Mark's idea.
It's almost as bad as 20 grade summers.
I think it's worse. Mark has and he's in phenomenal shape in his mid-70s. He is a believer that you can square the curve or largely square the curve.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you live well and drop dead.
Yeah.
And I think that's everyone's dream.
It's an odd thing, isn't it? But no, but that's definitely because, you get old and then if you have this sort of long deterioration, or it deteriorates and then you have to sort of suffer and exist. And we're just seeing so many of my parents' generation either died young or if they lived long, it's not pretty.
No.
And but I think the late baby boomers like me and the next generation like your good self are really fighting that. Yeah. And I think the squaring the curve I hadn't heard of that. I think that's a great way to describe it. It's we're only here for a time. There's a day we won't be here. But in the meantime, what can we do to maximize our life?
Yes.
And all its different, and defining that yourself, I think is a great idea too. It's different for different people.
It is. And it's eminently realistic.
Yeah.
So the idea of extending lifespan.
That's such an important point. You can make a difference and with life's up and down, but I mean, that's just such an encouraging thing. And you can do it.
The primary pillars of wellness and optimizing health span are free. So if we think about the longevity movement and you've got the extremes of the Brian Johnsons and, the Bezoses and that, like all these guys that are spending
something else,
millions and millions and millions and good for them.
Yeah.
But their dream is to increase lifespan. And you hear these crazy numbers. They want to live to 150, they want to live to 200, whatever. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever at this point in time that is possible. Now, it may change, but at this point in time, there is no evidence in humans that is possible.
Because they have that, is it TX, where you reach a point in time where you can age less than age itself. So you can gain a year when you're growing a year, and then that means you can sort of live forever. Is the theory?
Yes, there's the biological aging versus the time age thing, and you can certainly reverse your biological age. That doesn't mean you're going to live longer though. So you probably will live longer than you would have if you hadn't done the hard work. Yeah. So if you're going to die at 72, you might die at 82. But this notion that we can as a species dramatically shift what is the likely endpoint is at this stage speculative.
Sure.
So if it arrives, awesome. And it'll probably be really expensive for the first 20 or 30 years. So for those who can afford it, fantastic.
Yeah, buy shares.
Exactly. But for the rest of us, while those guys are figuring out whether that's possible or not and spending billions of dollars, we can do a bunch of things that don't cost anything at all that will dramatically improve your health span. And probably just as importantly, in many ways, more importantly, it'll make today better and tomorrow better. So it might make 20 years from now better, but it will unquestionably make you enjoy your life, make it more energetic, allow you to access more of your full potential and ultimately feel more fulfilled today. So it just makes sense.
100%. Better for relationships, better for yourself, better for
everything,
any impact you're having, and just the experience of life.
Exactly.
I think it touches all those points.
It's to your earlier point around we're not going to be here at one point. I mean, that's such an incredibly obvious thing that I see so many people in denial of. Like, we are mortal, and you get one, as far as we know, you get one shot. So whatever your perspective is on what lies beyond that veil, this is a gift. Like, this is a miracle, and you can't possibly objectively describe it as anything but that when you look at the data on what had to happen for our species to be on this planet.
Yeah.
So you've been given an incredible gift, and it just seems a shame not to live it to its full.
Absolutely. I take YPOs away for a retreat and train them on forum and things, and do some other exercises as well. And one of the things I do is slightly scary for a lot of participants. It's called Legacy. It's out of the box. And we basically lie them on the ground and get them to imagine what it's like at their funeral and talk to who's there, who's not there, how are you feeling about it, what are you seeing, and just take them to that spot.
Wow.
And then they do some self-reflection after that. And then we look at all their current life priorities and what's shifted, having gone through that experience. And always, it's a move from work, money, finance into health, relationships, impact, values, etc. Like, it's just taking the time to go, okay, I have a limited time left. What does it look like? Looking back from that perspective,
yes,
completely reorients the priorities in their life.
And it's extraordinary that you can do that in a few minutes. But absent that, those priorities might not have changed. Absent a health crisis, or a lot of people go through a similar process when they're confronted with mortality.
Yeah.
So that exercise out of the box and as unexpected as it would be, I'm sure, for that audience, can be so profoundly impactful in just a few minutes. Just tells me how little we think about it, because that's a pretty well-educated group we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Pretty, like,
they don't normally cry.
Right.
But no, very confronting.
Very confronting.
Like, some of them massively confronting. And I think the YPO forum is it's a very trusting, open environment.
Yes.
Like, you got to be careful. These exercises can be in the wrong hands, in the wrong environment, can be a little bit challenging. So there's already a trusting environment. You've already got people who know each other really well and have shared a whole bunch of stuff together. So do that together, then hold each other accountable to the outcomes. So we go from, here's the experience, here's the self-reflection, here's your current priorities, here's what you want to shift. Great. What actions are you going to take to move that dial? And so it's like a strategic plan, if you like, personal plan. So they have a whole bunch of things that they're going to physically do, and they hold each other accountable for that.
That's great.
Yeah.
And that's the way,
it's pretty powerful.
That's the way we should approach this whole discussion around health and wellness. That whole kind of knowing doing gap that we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
That most of us do know what to do. So I imagine 90% of what I'm about to suggest as the foundations of wellness that are all free, that don't cost a cent. I would guess that 99% of the audience will have been aware of.
Yeah.
But the difference is, I think sometimes we have to hear a message multiple times before it really starts to sink in. So I think there is a benefit to talking about it, even if people feel like they know about it already.
Definitely.
Secondly, connecting all the dots. Sometimes it's helpful to have someone help you connect the dots. But ultimately, bridging that gap between knowing and doing, something has to shift in the way that you're framing it. So I'll give you an example. If you've been struggling to lose weight, or if you've been struggling to be consistent with a gym routine, strength and conditioning routine, or whatever, for some period of time, and you've always got an excuse, there's always some other reason. Whatever it is that is motivating you to make that shift is simply not motivating enough. Like, you're not feeling that pain enough.
Yeah.
So by reframing it, doing the sort of exercise that you just spoke to, imagine what if, like, so what would it mean to my partner, or what would it mean to my children or my grandchildren, or reframing it and making the motivation to change so incredibly powerful that it is, first of all, it's associated with something bigger than you. It's not to look better in the mirror, to look better naked. It's there. I mean, that's part of it, but there's a motivation that is attached to a purpose that is greater than you.
Yeah.
And you should really not hesitate to drive that needle of motivation into yourself until the pain is such that you act and you keep acting. And I think if someone else can help you with that, like the way that you facilitate at YPO, or a PT, or maybe a partner, or a health advisor, or a spiritual advisor, or whatever, fantastic. But if you don't have that and you're just trying to get yourself up and going and you can't figure out why, because you know, but you're just not doing, then I think reframing it within the context of a higher calling is really helpful.
So I need to move past vanity. That's what you're saying.
Vanity is a huge motivator. Let's be honest. You know, and it's interesting in this because I also think about like what motivated me to first get into strength training.
Yeah.
And because I did a lot of sort of middle distance athletics, and I was a super skinny runner and all that kind of stuff at school. And never a very good athlete, but a very passionate and enthusiastic one. But I was deeply insecure. Like I went through puberty late. The guys that I was playing footy with got really bulked up and strong, and I was this super whippet, skinny kid. And it's a total cliche of them getting attention from the girls, but it's true.
Yeah.
And you could call that trauma, but I called it motivation. It was extremely motivating to lose the girl to the guy who'd gone through puberty earlier and was better built. And I was like, well, you know, I'm not going to let that happen again.
What's he doing now, though? Come on.
But it's funny. It doesn't matter what the motivator is. Like it can be a negative motivator, a positive motivator. Ideally, it is attached to something bigger. So I want to show up with more energy for my business. I want to be more present and playful with my kids. I want to be able to throw my grandchildren in the air. That's always better than a pure vanity thing. But if vanity is what it takes, you know,
so I'm
whatever.
and pretentious. What can I say? I think there's also, I think that's very true. Like the better the motivator, wherever that comes from, is going to help you overcome the reluctance and make it more consistent. The other thing I think is really owning who you are. If I'm the skinny, not fit guy in my head or in my heart, then it's always going to be a battle. If I go, no, I'm the guy that goes to the gym every week. That's what I do. That's me. That's who I am. Then whatever that metric is, or whatever that sense of ownership is, I think that's actually an underrated motivator
100%.
Because it becomes a part of your identity.
100%. I think there's one thing, like you're just dropping pearls of wisdom here, Mark, because the I am.
I do that, Josh. That's what I do.
And it's free. The I am, the most powerful statement you can ever say to yourself is I am. And the words that follow I am are really important. So I am broke. I am not good at my job. I am unlucky. These words, the subconscious hears those, and that is what the universe will then provide exactly whatever it is that affirms that I am. And equally, if I am fit, I am strong, I'm capable, I'm resilient. These are all really powerful. So, you know, whether you call it prayer or meditation or affirmation or manifestation, don't really mind what you label it. Sure. But the words that you say after I am, really important.
Something's definitely about proclamation, that like whether it's a spiritual thing or whatever you see that as, is are you aligning what you say to what you expect the future to bring you, and who you are. I think that's very good, because we all have that inner voice that we have to learn to renew our mind and not listen to some of the things that we tell ourselves, and make sure that what we say is aligned with where we want to go and what we want to be.
100%. This notion that, and you sort of see this in various spiritual traditions, but it's also true of the vanity comment that you made earlier. And that is that if I look in the mirror and I'm not happy with what I see, I can spend a lot of time clawing at the mirror and abusing the mirror and scratching up the mirror. It's not really going to change until I change the source of that reflection.
Yeah.
So everything ultimately is on you. That everything that you are unhappy with is a reflection of how. So if you're not getting the love that you want in your life, You could complain about the people who you're in relationships with, or you could be more loving. If you're not seeing the wealth that you want, if you're not seeing the fitness or the physical attributes or whatever, we complain about everything out here as if it was ever going to change what's here.
Yeah.
So it's surprisingly simple once you accept, if I want to change anything, it's got to start with me.
Yeah.
The language that I use is incredibly important.
Absolutely.
Like I am what? And then being really consistent in that. And it does ultimately become more or less a self-fulfilling prophecy, not to say that you won't end up with cranial surgery. Sure. Or that you won't lose your job, or that your relationship won't suffer some traumatic moment. Life still happens, but you're just in a better position to deal with it.
Absolutely true. Yeah. Can we come back to some of those foundations? Yeah. So most of us are familiar with sleep, exercise, nutrition, social, something that we talk about. People don't talk about it a lot, but give us some idea of why those things are important. Beyond the obvious, and what are some of the things that we can do to just adopt that?
I think there's a wonderful quote, and I wish I could remember who said it, so someone can kind of correct me when they chat GPT it. But it was that nothing in health or wellness makes any sense absent an understanding of evolutionary biology.
Okay.
So if we're talking physical health and wellness, and even elements of what you just spoke to, mental and emotional and social, we grew up in a very different environment to the environment we now live in. And the key to optimizing health and wellness as quickly and as sustainably as possible is to give your genes the inputs that they were programmed for a couple of million years to expect. And if we think about what that looked like, it was lots of low-level movement, lots of walking. So the kind of gathering bit of the hunter and gathering.
This is the zone 2.
Yes.
Yep.
Every day. Because we used to do it, the thinking is that we did it for 4 to 6 hours a day on just a consistent basis for a really long time, like millions of years type of stuff, many hundreds of thousands anyway. And there were brief periods of all-out exertion. So fights, battles, hunts, moments where you had to expend an enormous amount of energy very quickly. And you had to be strong enough to survive the encounter. And if you weren't, you needed to be stronger for next time. So if you think about your approach to movement as splitting into roughly 2 camps, one is consistent low-level movement of whatever type you want. Walk, casual ride on the bike, slow swim in the ocean. The idea is and walking is really probably the lowest intensity of all of those. The others can be slightly higher intensity, so don't go crazy, but just lots of low-level movement. Throwing a frisbee with the dog, playing with the kids, like it all counts. And then at least a couple of times a week, and I prefer to do 4 or 5 times a week because I really enjoy it, is you go for all-out exertion. Now that could be under a squat bar if you were doing weights in the gym, or a bench press or a deadlift. It could be a sled push. It could even be a movement like grappling or jiu-jitsu, or you're using an enormous amount of power that you can only sustain for a short period of time, and then you're resting and recovering. And what you're doing there is solving for a bunch of inputs that optimize your cardiovascular function, optimize your metabolic function, and optimize your endocrine, your hormonal environment. So without spending any money on any fancy supplements or peptides or hormones or red light therapy or cold plunge pools or whatever, which we'll get to later, you can start to mimic the conditions of your evolutionary ancestors and start to enjoy some of the benefits that they enjoyed without even knowing they were benefits. That ties into nutrition as well, which we might get to in a sec. We're going to talk about sleep. We slept a lot more in the past than we sleep now. So whilst there was always someone on guard in the village, so every now and then you'd have a crappy sleep because it was your job to be up all night, we were sleeping more or less from dusk to dawn. There was some breaks. They actually think now that there was sort of phases of sleep, 4 or 5 hours, and then there'd be playtime, lots more sex, lots more music, lots more dancing around than we're used to as well. Probably encourage that too. Why not go all out? But the point being is that we slept for longer. There weren't electric lights, so no artificial lights, obviously, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So again, can you mimic that completely? Of course not. But can you start to incorporate some of those conditions? setting a regular sleep time, minimizing screens and blue light before bed, all really simple stuff. Don't be scrolling on social media in bed, just. So
it's a great perspective, isn't it? Going back to looking at
it's really simple.
Times of a simpler life, however you want to define that, where you go to sleep when the sun goes down, you get up when the sun, you're walking and you're doing things and you're busy all day, and then every so often you got to run away from a bear or go and chase a deer or something.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to think about it, because that's very natural.
It's the definition of natural. Yeah. This is all not natural.
Sure.
So, and by the way,
it's almost overcoming the current environment, isn't it? To be able to,
it's compensating for
get back to some of those simpler ways of doing things.
It is, and by no means do I. All of this is great. Like, I wouldn't give up. Fantastic. Western medical care and 100%. Science and blah blah blah. It's all wonderful.
You can have both.
You can have both. That's the beauty. You can have both.
Yeah.
And so, should we talk about nutrition as well, because it ties into that.
Sleep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Movement,
so I do
sleep.
I've talked just about the way that I've approached this whole field.
Please.
Is you say I'm not the 4:00 in the morning TikTok science bro shouting in the sky, and it's just not me. So what I've tried to do is build.
I'd love to see that, by the way.
I just like to build in things that I enjoy, that I can be consistent. So I think the consistency thing over time
definitely
is a massive multiplier.
Yeah.
Because you got a gym, come back, you might get a little bump, but there's not a lot of change. You do that for a year, your body shape's shifted, you lost some fat and you put some muscle on. So there's all the disciplines around nutrition, how you sleep. I've learned to go, I was a night owl. I'm now going to bed earlier and getting up earlier, and it's much better. And I track my sleep to the whole Whoop thing. So, I really I quite like the data, and I'm very competitive on everything all the time. So it's kind of my way of
gamifying it.
Yeah, gamifying it a little bit. And why didn't I sleep in this one? But the whole 3-2-1, don't have any food 3 hours beforehand, no alcohol 2 hours beforehand, and no blue light an hour before. So try and do that. I'm not the zealot. Sometimes get it wrong. I like a glass of wine or a whiskey from time to time. But over time, I'm consistently doing that better than I used to, and I got a better outcome because of it.
Yes.
So the sleep, same with the exercise. I lack the discipline often to go and do it myself, so I book it in with a trainer, and Helen and I go together, which is kind of sort of fun as well. And so we make it a part of our weekly routine. It goes in the diary. Someone wants to meet me at that time, can't do it. I'm doing something else. Sometimes that changes, but it becomes, tried to make it a integrated priority in everything that I do, because I know it's what will help me be sustainable going forward.
Yes, that's perfect. I mean, I think it's even perfect in its imperfection, in the sense that
that's good to know.
We want to have a structure. I at least, and I think most people benefit from having a structure or a routine around this.
Yeah.
And then we're recognizing that sometimes for whatever reason, we can't meet the routine, and that's not a reason to give up. That's totally normal.
Yeah.
So that's not a bug, that's a feature. Occasionally you miss a workout, occasionally you have a pizza, occasionally you have 2 bottles of red wine instead of 1 glass.
Yeah.
Not great,
if I have
not the end of the world.
alcohol just before I go to sleep, there's a noticeable difference in the stress levels at night. Data. Like, I don't get as good a sleep before 1 o'clock. It's more stressy, and then it's flat lines. If I don't have it, pretty much flat lines all the way through. I'm a good sleeper, sleep very, really well, good REM, good, all the rest of it. If I have alcohol before, it's jaggy.
Alcohol's a shocker.
Actually, and so I see that and go, maybe I shouldn't have had the glass
Yeah.
glass of wine last night. But it definitely makes a physiological difference.
Definitely. And that's a great example of the for you, and the same for me, and I think for many people, you can't argue with the data.
Sure. Yeah.
So you subjectively you might imagine that you slept reasonably well after that late glass of wine, but the data consistently tells you otherwise.
Yeah.
To the point where I don't drink anywhere near as much as I used to. I still enjoy a glass of wine. I still enjoy a margarita every now and then, but it's not. It's a treat. Yeah. And I know I won't sleep well that night, and that's okay. I'm not going to beat myself up the next day. It's just, that's just what we've got together with some friends. We had a couple of cocktails. So be it.
We've tried to move, because I think, like a lot of people during COVID, got into a habit having a glass of wine every night. But I think to excess, it just became a common thing. And actually unraveling that, so don't drink during the week, just have something on the weekend, Friday night, Helen and I, end of the week. Well, it's something we do. Even going from just drinking a little bit every night to not drinking during the week actually was a little bit of a battle. Like, it does take a while for some of these things to become a habit.
Totally.
And sort of reinforced by the whole sleep thing. I found that kind of reinforced that well.
I agree. I think with the alcohol thing, what we now know, we'll just quickly touch on this alcohol thing because it is extremely topical. We now know without any doubt that there is no safe level of alcohol consumption. That whole thing that you and I grew up with, that red wine was healthy and it was the resveratrol. And
I'm still wedded to that theory.
Sadly, that thesis has not. That is
this
not
whole
been
no
proven.
level of ethanol is good for you. I'm not sure about that.
So we know that from a purely physiological perspective, there is no safe level or healthy level of alcohol. On the flip side, if you want to think about it more broadly, and we might jump into social health and other aspects of health because they're just as important.
Yeah, let's do
I think
that.
there's a really good argument that if you enjoy a glass of wine over a meal with family or with friends you haven't seen, whatever damage is being done theoretically from a glass or two of wine on that Saturday night is, I think, largely offset by the conviviality and the good humor and the conversation that flows with good old friends.
Yeah.
So there has to be, like I said, it's perfect and it's in imperfection.
Yeah.
We want a rule, a structure, but we want to hold it a little bit loosely and recognize that there's other aspects of life that will suffer if we become that guy or that girl.
That's right. And we know them.
We do know them. I think I was that guy.
We know them.
Yeah.
What do you think? I don't know if you know the answer to this question, actually, because I genuinely don't know the mechanism myself. People talk about the social connection. If you look at all the blue zones where people live for a longer life, they all have this sort of social component. They eat together or they commune together. Or what do you think the physiological is, if it's a physiological thing? What's the mechanism that actually brings extra health span based on social connection?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think to the extent that it's understood, there's, cortisol, the stress hormone, which is all about, cortisol is an unbelievably positive thing when it is short-term.
Yeah.
So it's released in response to stress. It increases your short-term strength. It makes you hold a little bit water and a little bit more over time. It means also a little bit more fat, which is not a good thing, but it changes the way that you hold on to various nutrients and makes more power available in the moment. It narrows. There's a whole bunch of great things about cortisol. If it's short-term, if it's chronic, it's highly inflammatory, and that can lead to all sorts of downstream impacts. In fact, a lot of medical authorities will tell you that inflammation is either the root cause, so it actually causes, or it is a significant confounding factor, like a contributing factor, I should say, to all the diseases that are most likely to kill you. Right. So, your heart disease, various cancers, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a big component of lowering inflammation by lowering stress, with sense. Cortisol being the mechanism.
Absolutely makes sense.
There's also a whole bunch of thinking around the neurotransport, like your serotonin, dopamine, blah, 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 that the happier you are, this all this research around you can lift a depressed person's perceived sense of well-being, but also the observed levels of serotonin in the brain by making them smile. Wow. So the idea that when we're happy, we smile, it goes two ways. Like we were talking about before, it's all connected, right? It's not one-way traffic. So smiling, laughing, engaging in conversation, just being around people who care about you, even if you're not necessarily participating because you're having a blue day. It's known through research that your internal markers of stress go down. Yeah. And including cortisol, and markers of happiness like serotonin levels go up. Yeah. So they think it's a combination of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't really made that connection.
And we're a social animal. So you know when you get like horses are social animals, you isolate a horse, it's going to be a problem horse. Like that, there are certain animals that need to be in
Don't put
packs.
the horse on social media.
Yeah, we're social, and I mean, God, look at all the mental health issues that came out of COVID and isolation and stuff.
Totally.
We're meant to be together.
Yeah, and our way of connecting digitally doesn't
work.
Doesn't cut it. You got to be physically in the same place.
Yeah,
not on your phone.
And you're not. It's not a genuine connection in any way, shape, or form. They're not friends. You know,
Sure.
Spoiler alert. They're not actually friends.
Right. That's right.
Secondly, the algorithm tips the scales and is trying to enrage us, makes us anxious. So not only is it not genuine, it's vicious.
Damage. Absolutely. Oh, it's so good. So just that old-fashioned social connection, having lunch, having dinner, having a glass of wine.
Having a glass of wine, maybe, if you want one.
And just that social connection.
And I think the thing with the booze,
sort of Southern European cultures and Japan and all these areas where there's great health age and people are living long and living healthy.
Yes.
Sometimes, again, some of our other common sense ideas.
100%.
Yeah.
And again, free.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in this health and wellness space that if you spend time on Instagram is going to make you feel like you need to buy 9 devices and you need a personal trainer and you've got to use 6 peptides and you need to design a protein and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And that's great.
See my supplement drawer.
Oh, don't worry. Mine's the same. Mine's the same. But 90% plus for the vast majority of people. So there are exceptions. If you're obese, if you're suffering certain disease, if you've got type 2 diabetes, there's exceptions. Sure. But the vast majority of us who are not suffering chronic disease and are not disabled in some other way, requiring some sort of medical intervention. So I'm not talking about special populations like that. Yeah. And I need to be careful about making that clear. But for the vast majority of us, 90% of the upside you will ever see in your health and wellness costs nothing.
Yeah. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
The one we missed out was nutrition.
Yeah.
So do you want to just have a quick chat into that? Because there's, we have this sort of fad cycle.
Yeah.
But underlying that, there's some sort of fundamental truths that seem to be sustaining.
100%.
But where are you at for yourself on this? What are you doing?
So I think you touched on the paleo world that I was talking about, 16, 17 years ago when we first started talking about it. And we touched on the blue zone regions. And so when you actually step back from it and you defat it, there's certain things in common across all approaches to nutrition that have been validated as objectively improving health and wellness. So whether it's the med diet, the blue zone diet, paleo had some really good research on it. Primal, which is Mark Sisson's twist on paleo. There's a bunch of these. What do they really have in common? Take away the brand name and take away some of the rigidity required to trademark it. Oh, this is my way. Sure. It is an absence of processed foods. It's an abundance of fresh produce. Not the keto crew, but everyone else. Lots of fresh produce, fruit and veggies. Typically seasonal, local, organic if you can afford it, but certainly fresh. Yeah. Haven't been in a freezer a fridge at Coles for 3 weeks. And then in terms of protein, choosing the best quality proteins that you can afford. So if you can afford grass-fed beef, and Aldi sell really good grass-fed beef, it's not as expensive as people think. If you can afford free-range or pastured chicken, free-range or pastured eggs. Those sources of protein that are as close to natural as you can find, nuts and seeds. These were all things that we have been eating forever.
So it looks like food.
It looks like food. It doesn't have ingredients. It's steak. There's not 12 ingredients.
I had a slight revelation around that. Growing a vegetable garden. I'm not the green thumb, but we planted, because we're sort of semi-rural out here now. I planted some vegetables and some salads and lettuces and tried to grow a whole bunch of things with zero confidence anything would ever come out of the ground. And it tastes different.
It does.
Like even just a lettuce. It's crisper, it's got more flavor, it has more texture. Like, how can you ruin lettuce? Woolworths, how can you do that? But it's just the fact it comes out of the ground, goes onto a plate and you eat it. It actually tastes different.
Yes.
And we've done some experimentation around regenerative farming meats and things. You actually need less. It has more flavor. And there's this odd contrast, isn't there? Because there's so much wisdom now around that. And yet these big machines that produce a lot of food for us and the way that we consume as a society is still not healthy, even though there's plenty of alternatives.
Well, and it was never designed to be healthy. So in fairness, the industrial food complex, their objective was not health.
Yeah.
Their objective was to, feed a large population as inexpensively as possible. And they've done a really good job.
Yeah.
So they've created shelf-stable foods, because they're actually not really foods, but shelf-stable things that are edible.
Yeah.
And they have done it at an extraordinarily low cost. So we as a culture now expect food to be a relatively small line item on the weekly P&L, the household P&L.
Yeah.
It wasn't that way for a really long time because food was expensive to produce and you had to have it fresh. And so it was a big item in the family budget. So we now expect it to be incredibly inexpensive. And good food does cost a little bit more. But to your point, you do eat less of it. It takes time to adjust. A lot of people take a little bit of time for their appetite to adjust. A lot of people don't actually have any awareness of appetite. They eat based on time of day, whether they're hungry or not. And they eat hyperpalatable foods that are not satiating. So they're designed to drive you crazy with desire but not fill you up, or you don't get a sense of being full.
Yeah.
So a couple of really easy tricks. So we want to eat, if you struggle with overeating a little bit, and lots of people do because you've been trained on these hyperpalatable foods, eat protein first. That's a real good one. Protein is very satiating, and it's also thermogenically, it uses a lot of energy to process. So you actually, without getting too down the rabbit hole, protein's good. It also builds muscle burns energy, fat does not, et cetera, et cetera. So we need more protein. I know there's people out there who disagree, but I happen to be in that camp.
Yeah.
You can get it from meat, you can get it from cheese, you can get it from fish, you can get it, if you want to, you can even get it from nuts. It's a bit harder to digest. There are vegan forms as well if you're that way inclined. Eat protein first. Eat salad, veggies, et cetera, second. And if you've got something carby, kind of get to it last. Now, if you think about it, most people do the opposite.
Sure.
And carbohydrate will spike appetite, so you tend to overeat.
Yeah.
Fats and protein reduce appetite because they're so satiating. Yeah. So there's just lots of little tricks.
If you have a bit of carbs, what do you have?
Oh, look, honestly, I like good bread. I'm not a Nazi about it anymore. I was. I was that guy that we were talking about before.
That guy.
Yeah, that guy. But if it's a good bread, not tip top, no offense to tip top, but if it's a good bread, that's with butter, hot, like it's the best.
Yeah.
I am a
Italian bread we had today.
It was amazing.
That was good.
It was so good. And I am a protein fiend. Like I just love it.
Sure.
So I should eat more veggies. I still, even at this point with everything I know, I force myself to eat more veggies. I like fruit. I probably not quite enough fruit. Some days I eat a lot, other days not, but I always get in protein. And I love it so much to the point where, I will have a tin of anchovies as a snack, no problem. My wife is horrified.
I'm horrified.
I love it. So find in that mix out of fruit, veggies, protein, find things that you like. Find the snack. The snacks could be boiled eggs. They could be a handful of nuts. They could be a tin of tuna if you're me.
Yeah.
It could be.
It's better than anchovies.
I prefer the anchovies. Yeah.
Wow.
I love them. But anyway, point is, a bit like we were talking about before, a structure is helpful because for most people, routine is helpful.
Totally.
Create a bit of a laundry list of things that you enjoy that are much better for you than not so good for you. And over time, try to transition. You don't do it overnight.
Sure.
I love those people who go, I'm going to do a pantry clean out, and they clean the whole thing out and they put healthy stuff in.
Yeah.
It's hard to sustain.
Totally.
It's easier to just go, you know what, I'm just going to be 20% better for a month. And then I'll be, maybe a few less snacks on the weekend the next month. And you just sort of dial it down.
That's good advice, that, isn't it? And again, I think it comes back to that consistency over time will get you the outcome you want.
Mate, the compound, I wish I learned this a long time ago. But compound, what you can achieve in 10 years. Yeah. Versus, I'm going to be ripped for summer.
Yeah.
Just focus on the long term.
And you get just
a little bit better.
Incremental increase over time. You get a great outcome.
100%.
In nutrition, I managed that reasonably well. I mean, I was okay before we met, but you really challenged the whole protein carbs thing, and I made some changes then. And my weight from basically 40s to 60s has remained within a 2-3 kilo band.
Yeah, that's great.
So right the way through. And then in the last, say, 6 months, I've been focusing on, can I swap, and it's harder at this age, by the way, just for the record, can I swap fat for muscle?
Yes.
So I've been able to reduce fat, but the muscle building, regaining muscle when you're past your 60 becomes increasingly harder.
Yeah.
So the building muscle mass in your 40s,
we should
30s,
talk about
40s,
this.
I think is a massive gain, because trying to do it in your 60s, that it becomes much more difficult.
Yeah. You know what? We should talk about this because I've noticed a huge difference in your physique over that period of time. Like you leaned right out, which was, really, really good for you. And then you progressively added muscle. And that's a great way to do it. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but I'm just going to talk in broad brushstrokes, and we can decide then if we want to kind of dive into any one area over any other. Yeah. You are so right that the older you get, the harder it is to build muscle, but it's never impossible. Yeah. So there's research on 80-year-olds who add muscle in nursing homes. So it is 100% possible, but you need to be more patient, which goes back to what we were just talking about before.
Totally.
You also need to increase your protein. Muscle is made out of amino acids. Amino acids are broken down from protein. You have to eat more protein. You simply cannot build muscle out of carbohydrate and fat.
Yeah.
So if you want to add muscle, you've got to increase your protein. You want to make it clean, good sources of protein. If you can start earlier and maintain, fantastic. But if in your 50s or 60s or 70s and you're at a point where you want to make some changes, you'd like to drop some fat, you'd like to add some muscle, as you know, you're not swapping one for the other because they're completely different tissue. Sure. But you are reducing, and you're not actually shedding fat cells. You're just reducing everyone's got the same amount of fat cells when they're born, when they die, but it's how much energy is stored in those fat cells. So you've got to coax the body into. There's something called a starvation effect. So if you just instantly cut your calories, your metabolism will slow down because your brain registers it as a starvation event. So you're much better off.
You lose muscle then.
Yeah, and you lose both. You end up losing muscle.
Yeah.
So
that's some of the damage around some of the fat drugs, Ozempic and those things. Fast loss, you're actually losing muscle as well as fat.
You will, unless you strength train and increase protein.
Okay.
Yeah. So whether it's drug induced,
that's the counter. Yeah.
Exactly. Whether it's drug induced or it is just voluntary calorie restriction, however you get there, you have to reduce calories to lose fat. By eating more protein, most people accidentally, without even realizing it, are reducing calories because the protein is so satiating. So you're eating less overall. So it's kind of two birds, one stone with protein. You're providing the building blocks for more muscle, but you're also providing a substrate the body considers more satiating. So you eat less. So you want if you can achieve a calorie deficit and at the same time increase the amount of protein, you're putting yourself into the best possible position. You're providing all the fuel to build muscle. You've then got to do something to kick the body into muscle building mode.
Yeah.
The only reason the body will ever add muscle post-puberty, so puberty, it's programmed.
Yeah.
Post-puberty, there's only one reason you add muscle, and that's because the body thinks that it's necessary for survival. So the body is always looking to minimize energy expenditure. So building muscle is energy intensive. Yeah. The body doesn't want to do it.
Right.
The body would just go, let's just hang on to this fat. Let's hang on to these calories because what we want to do is survive the next starvation event.
Yeah.
You need to convince the body that you're at greater risk in the short term than a future starvation event by mimicking the conditions that 100,000 years ago would have killed you.
Right.
So the body's like, wow, he just wrestled a bear. No, you didn't wrestle a bear. What you did was grapple with someone on the jiu-jitsu mat, or he just lifted a boulder. And it's like, no, you did a squat, but you're producing these inputs. The brain goes, we almost didn't make that lift.
Right.
And if we fell with that rock above our head, we would die.
Yeah.
So next time we need to be stronger. It's super simple, but it works.
Sure.
So the body starts adding muscle because you provided the raw material, which is the protein, but you also provided the stimulus, and the adaptation process kicks in. That the body's like, we need to adapt to this stress. Yeah. Let's add muscle.
Like it. Look, I'm not at the gym every day. but 3 times a week we'll do something.
Yeah.
And then we add in the walking and the dog and doing all the sort of zone 2 stuff. And incrementally, I'm still putting muscle on at this age. So it's definitely doable. A little frustrating. I'd like to do more, and there's probably some things I can do to help that. But it's definitely consistency, sustainability of getting that outcome.
Yes.
Those things are related. So you stress your body in order to convince it to build muscle.
Yes.
Is that where some of the other stress-inducing things come into play, or is that more hormonal, like ice baths, cold showers, light, all that side of things? Is that this, and the breathing? Is that in the same zone?
They're all different, all part of a holistic approach to health and wellness.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the benefits they give you in a second.
Okay.
But you don't build muscle by doing any of that stuff.
Sure.
The only thing that builds muscle is to put the body under a muscular strain that is so intense.
That's it.
That it requires an adaptation response.
Okay.
And so that's not going and lifting 2 kilo dumbbells for 15 minutes. You can, do that as your warm up for sure, but you have to do, this is a Mark Sisson thing, but you kind of walk every day and then twice a week lift heavy things. Other guys talk about doing hard things.
Yeah.
So it's got to feel like, I'm not sure if I can complete this.
Right.
And do it in a safe way. But the last set, if you're lifting weights, so you're doing, say you're doing 4 sets, 1 warm-up set and 3 work sets. And you might start, it's early on and you're bench pressing 40 kilos. So you do your 40 kilo bench press. So you maybe do 25 as a warm-up, you do 40 for your first set, then you go to 50, then you go to 60. And 60 is really hard. So at rep 4 or 5, you're like really struggling. So you've either got someone there to help you or you've got a safety bar so you don't hurt yourself. But you should take that last set to failure most days.
Okay.
And if you do that, you progress a lot faster. You'll still progress if you get close to that.
Yeah.
But if you only go to say 60% of what you're capable of, you'll lose fat, but you won't put on much muscle.
Got it. Work harder.
Work harder.
Work harder. Do that extra.
Yeah. You got to look like a crazy guy.
I think it's a good point. I think it's a good point. I see a lot of people at the gym, they don't do that. They don't get to, even myself, like, do I go to that last point of exhaustion? And
you would be surprised at what you're capable of.
Yeah.
There's a ton of research on this that the force throttler is your brain.
Yeah.
That your muscles are capable of much more. You read those articles about, 35-year-old mother lifts car off child.
Yeah.
And we're all capable of that.
Yeah.
But what will probably happen is you'll tear your bicep off the bone. So you'll get it lifted and the strain, the tendon and the ligament will shred.
Yeah.
And the brain goes, let's not tear anything. So let's make sure we stay within a range. So you feel like you're going all out, but I promise you, if I put a gun to your child's head, you'd lift that thing.
Sure.
You can always do more.
Yeah. That's good. All right. Nutrition.
Yes.
That.
Yeah.
Sleep. Done. Exercise. Done. Social. Done. What about some of the more, because I've kind of gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole around supplementation and those things. And I like to have a little philosophy around these things. So my philosophy around that is I don't want to take things that my body is no longer producing. What I want to do is stimulate my body to get it to produce it itself.
Okay.
So tea, for instance, reduces over time when you get older.
Testosterone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've been, trying different things to help stimulate that. Turk and a whole bunch of herbs and herbs and spices.
Yeah.
So
Tomcat Alley and
Tomcat Alley. Yeah. All these other supplementation, and then I did the gene testing to look at what are the areas in my gene setup where it would be good for me to either change my nutrition to a certain degree to help, or I had a propensity to not be able to produce enough of a particular type of hormone. I don't know the science. I'm just following the sheet. And so what I've tried to do is adjust my nutrition intake to take those things into account. And where there's some weakness, augment that with some supplementation. And then the generic stuff like NMN and resveratrol and
that's not that generic, by the way, but yes.
Okay. So what I've tried to do is baseline, everyone thinks these are anti-aging things. Let's do that. Augmentation based on gene analysis, and then some of the male hormone, cognitive health, and some other things where I think I just would like to help my body be the best that it can be without a replacement.
Okay. I'm probably a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah. You get a better outcome too. Just come on, let's be honest.
I think so. So my view, and this is probably good to discuss because I think your view is I hear from a lot of intelligent, thoughtful people who approach it on the basis going, well, I don't want to be super physiological. I want to maintain when I look at any marker of health and wellness, I want to maintain the high end of normal range. And so I will use various forms of supplementation. I'll adjust my diet or maybe even use certain pharmaceuticals if necessary, but it's to maintain me within a normal range. My approach is probably a little bit more aggressive. I would like to maintain the position on certain markers that would be more reflective of my early 30s than what is normal for a 52-year-old. So what a lot of people don't know is the normal range changes by age. So your normal range for testosterone, for example, as a teenager is 50% higher than your normal range for a 40-year-old. So I don't want to go back to the way I felt at 18, tearing doors off cupboards and attacking trees and being a completely crazy person. Yeah. But I quite like my level of mojo in my early 30s.
Yeah.
So for me, if I can maintain my testosterone at that level, my free testosterone, so that's also looking at the sex hormone binding globulin,
sure,
that for me is good. So everyone has a different position.
Yeah.
And thank God we live in a free country. You've got the agency to choose where you want to sit on that spectrum.
Yeah.
I also have a high level of comfort for well-proven pharmaceuticals.
Sure.
So things like metformin, for example, there's certain elements of the research that are by no means conclusive, but I would call very encouraging. It's been prescribed for like 70 years. The safety data on it is pretty robust. So even if it doesn't turn out to be a cancer prophylactic, for example, which is one of the things it's being touted as, it's not doing me any harm. It's reducing the total glucose level in my blood, which has been associated with reduced inflammation. So I'm okay with that. Yeah. So everyone has to work out where they sit.
Sure.
The other thing,
it's kind of do the research, isn't it? Like do the research, find out what you're comfortable with, and do something.
Yes.
And walk down that path.
And don't start there. Start with the other stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
So,
because the thing for me has been, I'm still not doing enough exercise or eating well enough or sleeping well enough. There's probably still a 20% margin in that.
Oh, 20,
am I playing at the sort of the marginal ends with some of these other things? And yet I feel the combination of all the things I've done, particularly recently, have been very helpful. But it's like the marketing, 50% of my marketing is a waste of time. I just don't know which 50% it is. So it's something in that combination. So it's definitely, I think, something in supplementation. So metformin, there's been a lot of research on that. A lot of people talk about it.
Good metformin.
Yeah. What else?
So creatine monohydrate, which used to be
doing that.
Just the bros wanted it, but now everyone should use it.
I've become a bro. We started doing creatine.
Great. How many grams?
Just a teaspoon.
Okay.
It's pretty light.
Yeah.
Just give it a go. And we did the whole, rather than, you can hyper boost for a while.
20 grams.
Yeah. If you just do a little bit for 4 weeks, apparently it gives you the same effect over time. So we did it together.
Oh, great.
Did that together. She also did added collagen in.
Yeah.
For her. And then there's a bit of research, and someone mentioned to me about boron being an activator around creatine use and stimulation of testosterone as well, I think.
Yeah.
Something in that mix. So I've tried to actually put a boron on there as well.
Yeah. So boron is one of those ones that if you're deficient, it's a game changer. If you're not deficient, but a lot of people are deficient because of just mineral depletion in the soil. Yeah. So that's another rabbit hole, which we won't go down. But a lot of these things people say, well, it's unnatural to take all this. It's like, well, we don't have natural soil anymore. And we do eat processed foods, and we do have a lot of fruit and veggies that sit in a fridge for 3 weeks before we buy them at Woolworths. Yeah. So defining natural, it's pretty slippery.
That's what I'm trying to do is replace.
Yeah.
What's missing? Can I replace it or augment it to help my body to do more of it?
Yes. So creatine is really important, and for everyone. And you might want to experiment with a higher dose. There's the research around particularly the anti-neurodegenerative disease potential of creatine is particularly profound at 10 grams a day plus. That'd be 2 heaped teaspoons. Okay. So it's not tons and it's cheap. Sure. It's not an expensive supplement.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
So I use a bunch of other stuff that won't be for everyone. So some of the more sort of standard stuff that people have heard of, which would be a really high quality fish oil, particularly one that's really high in DHA, a turmeric, a really good high quality turmeric, mixing with a bit of pepperine, which is an extract from pepper, which makes it more bioavailable. Some vitamin D. I love getting sun, which is probably obvious, but I also take vitamin D supplementary because actually paradoxically, the more tanned you get, the less vitamin D you produce.
That's true. And also it's one of the most, when you test people, it's one of the most common deficiencies.
We almost all are.
Yeah.
Because the sun aware, sun sense thing, I mean, it's really smart to be sun aware and you shouldn't get burnt and all that kind of stuff. But like everything, you can take it too far.
Totally.
And if you don't get sun, you're going to get really sick.
Yep.
So vitamin D helps offset some of that.
I try and do the 15 minutes in the morning, daylight, early circadian rhythms and vitamin D.
Perfect.
Just do that.
Perfect. And then a couple of times a week, I try to get not quite my whole body because my neighbors would be horrified, but mostly.
Or entertained. Jealousy is a terrible thing.
I don't think it'd be jealousy. I think it'd be horror. They'd call the police. But, try to get as much of your body exposed not in the midday sun, but like at 10 or 11, try to get your whole body exposed for 10 minutes, a couple of times a week. You're not going to get burnt, Anyway, I also add additional fiber to my shakes, psyllium husk for various health benefits of that. I add hemp seed because it's a great source of natural protein. It's also got non-fish oil, omega-3s, sort of the plant-based omega-3s, which are good for different reasons to the fish-based omegas. So look, there's a long list of stuff that I use. The other stuff that I have got into is peptides, which again are not for everyone. And I would suggest that they are definitely not in that camp of, peptides never existed in the food supply. So we're not replacing something that was natural. But that's where I lean more into science. And there are certain things that science has gifted us with that I think are worth exploring if you are interested in taking it to that level.
Sure.
But to your earlier point, we are so far down the rabbit hole now. Like if we're sleep, exercise, nutrition, natural light, good relationships, good kind of social connections in your community, hopefully some sort of spiritual practice of some description. Way more important than peptides.
Sure.
So you get to that later.
I did try the
BPC?
Yeah, the 197 or whatever they call it.
157,
157. Keep up with my acronyms and my numbers.
Yeah.
For healing.
Yes.
So problem with the shoulder.
That's what I use it for.
Absolutely. Like focus group of 1, absolutely increased the rate of recovery.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, I've found the same thing.
There's definitely something in that science. I haven't really got a lot into it, but certainly if I've tweaked something or whatever, we'll take that. And
it's with those sorts of compounds, it's very much buyer beware. So it's not the research is light. These are not, they're not subjected to pharmaceutical grade, double-blind, placebo-controlled tests because they're really expensive.
It's on TikTok now. So.
It's on TikTok.
It has to be true.
It's got to be true.
Yeah.
So, buyer beware.
Sure.
Do your own research. But BPC for me was I've had a whole bunch of shoulder issues. I was always the smallest guy on the rugby team. I got smashed every single week for 10 years. So all sorts of shoulder issues.
Papakura High School.
Sorry, what was that?
I was at Papakura High School and I was the skinny white guy.
Yeah.
It wasn't good.
No. My shoulder is not thanking me.
Yep.
The only point in my adult life that I felt that I've had something approaching normal mobility in my shoulder was post BPC 157.
Yeah, definitely something in that. But as you say, people need to do the research and also the providers.
Yeah,
like look, make sure they're tested, etc.
100%.
Totally. So you mentioned a spiritual aspect there. So what does that mean for you as far as a health span or life and sense of purpose and those things? From a spiritual perspective, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think I've sort of gone full circle on this because I grew up in the Anglican church and then went to a Lutheran high school. It was a very, very religious school, chapel every day, religious education 3 times a week as a compulsory class. And I think like a lot of people who grow up in a traditional religious environment, I then rejected it because you reject everything that has anything to do with your parents for a period of time.
It's the done thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you kind of run off seeking truth elsewhere. And I went to a Zen school in London for a little while when I was living there, and I've explored a lot of comparative faith study, put it that way. And it's really only been in the last few years that I think I've come back to the church, but with a different perspective to the one that I had as a kid. I see wisdom in a lot of different traditions, and that includes but doesn't make exclusive any of them. And so what I love about going back to the church now is, there's something beautiful about going back to something you grew up with. There's there's a comfort in that. Secondly, this is a Judeo-Christian society. There are lots of faiths, and we accept all faiths. We're very, thankfully in Australia, very open.
Pluralistic society.
Exactly, which is a beautiful thing. But if we think about the structure of our society, our legal system, our system of organizing ourselves, we are of a tradition
Absolutely.
that is Judeo-Christian in nature. So, and coming back to it as well, having read a bunch of Zen and falling in love with Alan Watts, and coming back and looking at Christian scripture, it's like, we're all saying the same thing. Like, there is so much in common here. Yes, there's significant differences. And if we want to get into theology, there's enormous differences. But if you peel it right back, what it speaks to is a way of thinking about your relationship with yourself, with others, and with God, the universe, whatever you choose to call that higher intelligence. Most faiths are suggesting a very aligned perspective. And I find that enormously comforting, and I find a lot of peace in that.
How do you mean aligned? What do you mean by that?
Because I think ultimately the suggestion is that, I'll just give you my perspective, which is not necessarily pure Christian or pure anything, but this is just where I've landed. I think that a great deal of our anxiety and depression and worry comes from a misapprehension that we are somewhat separate from source. So whether you call source God or Brahma or Buddha or whatever, like choose your word, I'll just use the word God, that we misunderstand our relationship with the divine. And by misapprehending that relationship, we see ourselves as separate. So we need to feel worthy or good enough or virtuous enough to reacquaint ourselves with the divine. And I think that keeps a lot of people away from that relationship or the potential of that relationship. I think another misapprehension is that we need a mediator. So it needs to be a church of any description, or it needs to be a priest, or it needs to be a spiritual healer or a guru or a swami or whatever, that there is someone else who needs to mediate for us with the divine, which is, like, I guess, just another example of that misapprehension of separation.
Yeah.
And when we recognize ourselves as a temporal, mortal, individuated expression of a eternal, universal, immortal energy, we are the wave on the ocean. We are, and I do love the Buddhist idea, the Zen idea of it's non-dual. We're neither the wave or the ocean or both. Like, it is one thing. Sorry, I should say we're neither wave nor ocean. We are both. So there's no duality in that. And I think a lot of Christian scripture and some, my father and I, one type stuff like Proverbs, there's a lot in there that is suggestive of the same thing. And then what Jesus was really trying to teach us, in my mind, is that we are all divine, and we have the capacity at any point in time to recognize that and act accordingly, and act in his example. And I think Buddha was saying the same thing. And I think, honestly, Muhammad was saying the same thing. I think most of them were saying the same thing. So we as humans, because this is the way we like to do things, we're a very tribal species. Your club is not my club, and you can't get into my club, and I'm going to kill you because you're not in my club. And we do what we do, but we are all ultimately one. We're individuated expressions of one. And if we can recognize that, then we're not as fearful of the other, because there really kind of is no other.
You get into my space, mate. This is my thing. I got a whole channel on this stuff.
I know.
Monday movement. Yes, have a look.
You've been a profound influence on me in this, because I think you were probably one of the most important people who I met in terms of my recognition that rejecting some elements of what I considered a political or hierarchical church structure, I really did throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so you helped me.
The literal baby in this case. It's Christmas.
Little baby Jesus. And you helped me realize that. So that seeing wisdom in Zen doesn't mean that there's not a profound attachment that I have to Christianity, and seeing, do you know what I mean? Like this.
Yeah, I do. And it's an element I think we often in Western society disregard or downgrade or feel like you have to be X, Y, and Z to be able to go on a spiritual journey and explore those things. I had the opposite experience to you. So I wasn't raised in a Christian environment at all, and then had some profound experiences in my early 20s that convinced me there's a lot more going on than I had any idea for, and became a Christian. And he literally intervened and saved my life at the time. And it was kind of an all-in commitment to him and going like, okay, I'm going to love and serve you. And like, what are we doing? So it was an unusual experience, not something that I was looking for, and it profoundly changed my life. And then, you talk about going into this whole thing around, there's a philosophy that can come out of that. There's a lot of societal foundations that were built on a Judeo-Christian, which has almost been separated and kind of avoided. A lot of the ways we think and how we perceive the world, and how we treat women, how we think about all these different aspects of life, how we do family, how we interact with other people, how we look after the people that can't look after themselves. All those things were radical social changes that came from Jesus. He was just an absolute revolutionary radical. And we've sort of kind of made him into some sort of, polished feet and shiny head and stick him on a wall somewhere. And yet there's some real profound truth in that. And, coming back to, it's probably going more into my other channel kind of conversation, but, I think it's very much part of our whole existence.
Yeah.
We're spiritual beings having an earthly experience. And I think if we don't at least explore into that whole spiritual realm, there'll always feel like there's something missing. I build all the wealth in the world and it doesn't mean anything. I'm not quite, relationships aren't kind of working sort of well. Like what is it? There's no sense of purpose. If there's nothing, what's it all about? So that sense of purpose, sense of, you talked about divine connection. I think that's a great way to do it. A great way to think about it. And sometimes the trappings of Christianity can get in the way of, for me, it's a personal walk with him and a connection, relationship with him. That's my expression of it. That's the way that it's my understanding of that whole walk.
Yes.
But that's an important part of what makes me me, what helps me do the things that I do, which gives me a sense of purpose and direction, which is an important part of Healthspan and living a healthy and complete life.
I completely agree. And I think as well, like there's the overlap between what we just spoke to and what we understand from quantum physics. And by the way, my understanding of quantum physics is pretty superficial. I'm an ex-lawyer who had a career in fashion. So take it with a grain of salt.
So tell me about quantum physics, yes.
But even kind of, Jungian psychology, this idea of the collective subconscious, there's a bunch of different ways to approach this. And I think if we start to break down the barriers of, there is some real, I think, reticence around traditional church hierarchies and structures for a lot of people. And so when I talk to people about it, I'm trying to give them multiple ways of looking through that prism that doesn't necessarily require them on day one to embrace any theology.
Yeah.
Is to say that, have you at some point in your life felt that you were connected to something outside of yourself? Was there something bigger that you felt connected to in some way?
Yeah.
And most people, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And it's just instantly dismissed. And it's like, well, let's just lean into that for a little bit. What that might be suggestive of. What do you think? Like what? So this idea that creation was done at the Big Bang. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Everything that has ever been and ever will be is now. So you can talk about the multiverse, you can talk about quantum planes, you can talk about, the collapse of possibilities upon observation. You can come at it from a million different angles. But the point is that inside this skin, and what I perceive out there is a fraction of what's really going on. And if you could tell me without mentioning the church at all, that there was a force that I could tap into if I just opened my eyes and my mind for long enough to be open to it and just to sit still with it for a minute.
Yeah.
You know, if you didn't mention the church, 100% of people would sign up. But it's
I find that actually, I find that really interesting because, you know, I think it's part of the Christian experience. You know, be part of a group of a fellowship of people who kind of believe the same things, and it's part of the journey.
Yes.
But coming from a non-church background, people, because of all the lots of things that happened in churches, full of imperfection, people, all sorts of things that go wrong and historically and whatever. They don't want to talk about church, but they're quite happy to talk about Jesus and who he claimed to be and what he was and what he did and how he, you know, even from a social perspective, but then from a spiritual perspective, he's pretty confronting what he said and what do you do with that? And people are quite happy to have that conversation. So I don't think the church has done itself too many favors, and yet it's held to a high standard as well. So, you know, if you went to the gym and went, this gym is terrible, it's full of fat and unfit people. Yeah. Well, the church is full of sinners who are trying to work it out. You know, and they'll get stuff wrong.
Yeah.
So it's
isn't that the whole point?
Exactly.
Aren't we all fallen? Aren't we all sinners?
That's right. We're all, you know, none of us are perfect.
We're all a mess.
That's the deal.
We're all just trying to figure it out.
You know, and in the Christian tradition, you find forgiveness and a whole bunch of things.
Forgiveness and grace, like the grace thing is
good things, man.
Just beautiful thing.
They're good
beautiful
things.
thing.
They're good things. We all need that. And sometimes it's presented in very, you know, dogmatic and ways rather than helping people just to explore that. And I think what you're saying around, is there something outside of us that is eternal or spiritual or just outside our physical realm, is the first step on that journey to what does this all mean and how does it all work and what is it all about, and some sense of fulfillment or completeness or sense of being and purpose that comes on that journey.
Yes.
And so I think looking for something that can center us, calm us, give us some acknowledgement of some kind of outside of us experience.
Yes.
I think is the first step on that journey.
Yeah.
Even if you think about you talked about the Big Bang and whatever, for me, there's two choices there. The Big Bang came out of absolutely nothing, or Big Bang came out of an eternal creator. Like, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. It's almost like,
right.
You know, there's still like a start. To start from nothing or to start from a benevolent creator. That's kind of the fundamental choice.
Yes.
If it did, who is, you know, what, who, and how does that all work? Is a good question to ask, I think.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
The Zen crew have some really interesting metaphors that they use for people who are trying to, you know, approaching this, but not quite sure. And even that one of the ones that I love, which is like one of the ones I first attached to in Zen, is that what is life? And if you imagine a waterfall and that body of water that is a single body of water hits a waterfall and breaks into a billion little droplets who all think they're individual droplets.
Yeah.
And then they hit the bottom and they reconnect. Top to bottom is life. And there's a million different ways to look at this. But the energy from which we came, we are always connected to. So I think that's another, for me, that was a really, right. Like, of course that makes sense, but it took me a while. It's like, no, I came from it and now I'm something completely different. And then hopefully I'll return to it after I die. But that's not true. So we are just a different manifestation of that divine force. And you don't have to come at it. I couldn't care less whether you came at it through a Christian perspective or you got through New Age manifestation. Or to go back to the original question was, is a spiritual practice important to health and wellness? I would say 100%.
Yeah. And that's the question for today.
That's the question for today. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, because you can argue all night with people about theology or,
totally. Start the journey.
Who cares?
Start the journey.
Doesn't matter.
Start the journey. And then, you know, I think truth prevails ultimately.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I honestly think that arguing semantics around this is no different to a CrossFitter and a vegan or a, you know, like someone who is so attached to their specific perspective on wellness. I'm like, good, it works for you. Yeah. Like that's all I need to know.
Right.
Like if you're happy and it's getting you closer to what you consider your ideal, veganism, CrossFit, Christianity, Zen, doesn't matter. But I think the spiritual practice, that awareness that you are part of something bigger and thinking just for a little while every day, call it prayer, call it meditation, call it sitting still, whatever.
Yeah.
Thinking for a little bit, well, if I am part of something bigger and I do have this miracle of a life to make some choices, what do I want to do with it? And if the answer to the question, honestly, is make as much money as possible or do as many drugs as possible or have sex with as many people as possible, good for you. That's your choice. But I think most people on sitting in that would probably not decide that. And they might think that there's other things they might want to do with it. And to your mortality exercise at YPO, it's just that recognition that you're mortal, you've got a short period of time, there is something bigger. You've got this opportunity to be an individuated expression of something collective that you will return to. What are you going to do with it?
It's a great question.
Find some purpose.
That's a great question. Because it does link into that purpose piece, doesn't it?
100%. 100% it does. Because, when I was interviewing Lara Day, the intuitive, she was talking about purpose and she quoted a piece of research that from a longevity perspective, purpose is actually number one. Having a higher purpose that you live for is more important than sleep, exercise, or nutrition. Now, now I don't know if that's, by the way, I haven't fact checked that. The point that she was making is the research that she was quoting, and someone's going to go and check it and tell me I'm wrong. But
just drop it in the comments. drop it in the comments. Fact check time.
That
definitely has an impact, though. I would say, like just intuitively.
Well, yes,
no pun.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
She also made the point after we finished recording where she's like, but it's not just about the purpose. It's that when you have a higher purpose, you act differently. So you will take better care of yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
So true. You downstream, you get all the behaviors that you need, but they're in service of something higher.
And there is something, there's extremes of that, right? There's extremes where it does damage. But if there is a sense of purpose and direction and reason for being, you're right, you'll tend to look after yourself better because you have a sense of place within something bigger.
Yes.
But also there's something energizing about that.
Very.
We all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, even in a company environment. Vision is so important. We want to get with a group of people and we're heading in a direction, we're helping them, we're changing the world, and we're doing all this good stuff. That's energizing, and that has to have some sort of physiological impact, even if it's just lowering stress and
100%.
Cortisol. And
on a really superficial level, you're happier. You feel more fulfilled. There's all that research on go and do, if you feel blue, go and do something for someone else. And that from a gratitude is just a fabulous thing to
underrated again.
Meditate on gratitude for 10 minutes. You're not going to feel as bad about your life anymore. You just so I think going back to the spiritual practice and the role that it plays. For most people, to your point, it's quite centering. Most people find some real peace in just that simple act of prayer and meditation, whatever you want to call it. As you are sitting there in prayer and meditation and you are contemplating what it's all about, you typically find that you start to almost feel or hear, I don't know what word you start getting answers to that question. And that gives you some, people say, I get my best ideas in the shower or when I'm, out having a swim, or I think that's just another version of the same thing. You stilled the mind for long enough to hear what's always there. It's like, that's what I should do.
Engage your frontal cortex. And
in my business or in my relationship or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. So I do the normal kind of Christian at church and do all that. And prayer is important. I think the Bible is completely underrated. Like even from a purely practical perspective. I wrote a book on the Book of Proverbs.
Yes.
With some daily devotionals and things in there. It's phenomenal advice from some of the wisest people ever lived. Heaps of stuff in there. I think there's a spiritual component to that. So I read that regularly most days. And but I go out in the morning when I have my bit of sunshine, have a cold shower, I hate, but I love, and then go outside and I just have what I call my coffee with God. 15, 20 minutes out in the sun and I pray. And the gratitude thing, always try and think of at a time like that, and also when I go to bed, 3 things I'm grateful for.
Yes.
So in the evening, it's like 3 things. My day went terribly, but what are the 3 good things? What are the 3 good things in the midst of that of that day? And it helps me sleep and centers me, and everything's cool.
Yes.
And in the morning, so just have a time with God, and for me, it's chat. And there is an element of listening in that, and a sense of things settling and sense of purpose and direction and some insights and some things that I believe is sort of divinely orientated.
Yes,
that kind of sort of downloads from heaven, if you like. That's sort of my perspective and the way that I do it. And I agree with you. I think find whatever that is for you in your world and start walking down that path, that spiritual path. Don't ignore it completely.
No.
Meditate, find a quiet time, get by yourself, do something that acknowledges there's something bigger than yourself.
Yes.
And I think that's just a good thing to do as a human.
Yes.
It helps.
Yes. And don't make the mistake that I made for a long time, which is to conflate a flawed political structure or
Please
don't conflate
totally.
with what this opportunity is.
Yeah.
Because we all know, to your point earlier, every church, every business, every gym, every organization of more than one person has politics, and there are well-intentioned smart people and there are poorly intentioned dumb people and everything in between.
It's the human condition.
It's just how we are.
Yeah.
So if you have had, like I had, some experiences with sort of self-professed Christians that didn't feel very Christian, and you kind of rejected that whole world on a pretty limited data set, I'd encourage you not to do that.
Yeah.
But if you have, then try approaching it from a slightly different direction, which is that, be still, consider meditating, think about gratitude, try to reframe when something is happening to you, your point about I've had a terrible day, ask yourself questions like, what am I meant to learn from this?
Totally.
Where is this redirecting me to? What could be behind the next door when this one slams shut?
Go exploring. Like go and look and have a look, and how does this religion work? What's this all about? What's the spiritual things? Explore.
Yeah.
And allow the truth to prevail.
Yes. I can't remember, it was George Bernard Shaw. I can't remember, someone said that. I don't know if I believe in God or not, but I know it's an important enough question to consider carefully.
Yeah.
So wherever you end up,
no, that's
give
right.
it some
It
thought.
is. Like,
give
if
it some
there is any
thought.
essence of truth in any of this stuff, then it's probably a good idea.
Probably worth thinking about.
Was it Winston Churchill who said, Mr. Churchill, are you ready to meet your maker? He said, Madam, I think the question is he ready to meet me?
Oh, legend.
Yeah, he's a legend. And we got Christmas coming up.
Yeah. Speaking of,
looking forward to a break and some downtime and some time with family. I mean, that's family, fun, faith. There's a whole bunch of stuff in that.
100%. And I think it is a great time to reflect and to the discussion we're having right now around the Judeo-Christian tradition of our society. I mean, Christmas is literally Christ.
Yeah.
So whether we're Christian or not, we are participating in celebrations related to things that are incredibly important to the Christian faith.
Yeah.
And I think for all of us, it's a downtime of some description. It's a moment with family. It's about gift giving, generosity, grace, gratitude, all those good G words.
Yeah.
So I think it is. It's a really good time to reflect on the year that was and the year that's coming, but it's centered around a very specific moment, and I think that's worth thinking about too.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously in Christian circles, it's, other than Easter, it's probably the most important thing, and it's got all sorts of colourful trappings and all sorts of things around it, but fundamentally, it's a celebration of the greatest gift, which is God coming incarnate amongst men and celebrating that. So it is a time of reflection, time to be grateful. It's a wonderful time that we seem to have embedded in society too, where you get some time off.
Yes,
like have a break, have a good time. In Australia, we're super spoiled. We can go to the beach and just have a wonderful time with family and some downtime before we sort of pick up tools and get back into it sometime in January.
Yes.
And it is a good time to reflect, good time to connect, good time to be grateful and thankful and enjoy it. Be mindful of the moment. Don't worry too much about the next year coming, and just enjoy the moment and be present and with presence. Yeah. Be present with the people around us and be grateful for their company.
Yes.
And families, you know what? I think we're allocated one difficult relative. There's always someone, isn't there? There's the uncle, the auntie, there's somebody floating around. It's just like, oh my gosh, within my family, that gene pool is not looking that good.
He didn't get the memo on alcohol, I don't think.
No. It's just, so it does have its challenges as well. We emigrated, which solves a lot of those things. That's the way to do that. Apologies to my family. It's a good time to contemplate too, and think about. One of the things I try and do is what was this last year all about? Without being sort of too introspective, it's more like, what did I learn out of this year? What can I apply next year? What are the good things to celebrate over this year? What are the things that maybe we could do that better next year? Learn something along the way, and you never stop learning. I think that the discipline of a little bit of self-contemplation in a season like this is a good thing to do.
Yes, I completely agree, and I do think that it's just worth remembering that what we're celebrating was a gift. And there is something about that whole story. Well, there's lots of things about that story that impact us as a culture and as a society in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And so, yes, superficially, it's a retail occasion, and it's a great time for shopping.
Well, our retail clients love that.
And it's at a more profound level, it's about family coming together and recognizing what we mean to each other through exchanging gifts and having a lunch together or a dinner or whatever it is that your family does. But I think the reason that we're celebrating at that particular time of year for that particular reason in that particular way is worth thinking about, whatever your faith. So happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, whatever it is, there is something about this time of year that faiths of all description consider very important. And for Christians, obviously, it's extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of a bit of the reason for being. Like even I was thinking about the wise men that came. We talk about the three wise men. That's not what happened.
Right.
These people would have traveled possibly for a couple of years. Would have been at least 100 with soldiers, and they were the Magi, so the kind of the learned ones from probably Babylon and Persia.
Right.
So they would have been dispersed. So on this occasion, we have three wise men standing in this stable kind of thing. It was probably a couple of years after that, because Herod had killed all the babies. So Jesus would have been kind of an unusual spectacle, and had gone south to probably to Egypt at that point. And so these learned people from all these different disciplines from other places in the world came and paid homage to him.
I didn't know that.
Gifts. Yeah. There's a whole different, some of the traditions we have are kind of a capsule of.
Right.
The sort of Coca-Cola version.
Right.
Whereas if you look at some of the biblical records, there's a little bit of a different story. Right.
Yeah. Right. Which is to me, that's actually kind of, I think one of the beautiful aspects of religion is this. It's not a historical document necessarily. It's an interpretation of historical events in metaphor and in proverb and at least this is the way I think about it, to teach us. And that's Christian and non-Christian texts. I don't think any of them are documentary accurate, but that's not the point. So it's always interesting to hear, well, it could happen that way, but it might have happened completely differently. Yeah. And it's been packaged in a way for certain reasons. But I don't think that, like some people say, well, that's not true then. So no, you're missing it's poetry, not prose, man. Like you're missing it.
There is an element around some of the biblical stories that are incredibly historical.
Right.
Like probably some of the best documented historical events in history.
Right. Like what would be an example?
So non-Christian historians use biblical texts as historical documents.
Right.
Because they're eye testament or their second eye testament. And also if you look at some of the continuity of it, because it was kind of held as sacred, it was copied very clearly. There's not a lot of variance. You get the odd bits and pieces, but essentially the core of it has remained very consistent over a long, long period of time.
Right.
And it's not a single book. It's 66 books from 40 authors over, 1,000 years of different writers from way back to, post a few hundred years post Jesus. So it's actually does have some really clear historical evidence of people who lived and what they said and cities they went to, and like it's pretty extraordinary.
And I that's really interesting to hear. And I think to the extent that is not true in certain areas, like the 3 wise men example that you provided, it doesn't matter.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's, if we're talking about the spirituality element as opposed to necessarily maybe the theological discussion.
Yes.
I don't think it matters. You know, like I'm reassured that a lot of it is historically accurate, but equally if you had said, well, 80% of it is historically accurate and 20% of it is reinterpreted or repackaged or whatever, it's like, if it was 60-40, it wouldn't change the way I feel about the book. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just don't think it's relevant. Like for me, at least, for my version of the truth, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've got kind of fascinated by it. I'm not theologically trained, so there's plenty of people out there a lot wiser than me on these things. But I found it's been a bit of a cornerstone of my own faith journey. Well, that's obviously not true. Well, hang on, maybe it is.
Right.
It's sort of testing, particularly around the core of it. I think from a Christmas perspective is Jesus claimed some radical stuff.
Yeah. 1,
did he exist? 2, did he really claim those things? And if he did, what does that actually mean? I think as the core, that's been the core of my exploration of this journey that's sort of led me into sort of believing the things that I do. So it's quite confronting because we're all sort of familiar with Christmas, Easter and whatever, but when you really get down into the story and who he said he was either a fool or just, a liar, or maybe he was who he claimed he was.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty profound thing to look at if you think about the significance of his truth.
So I read it. I'm interested in your opinion on this because we actually haven't spoken about this. So this is a wild card one. But I'm trying to remember the name of the book. It was someone that Joe Rogan interviewed, and it was, Joe sort of interpreted the book as suggesting that Christianity was based on a mushroom cult. But having read the book, that was not the bulk of the book.
Yeah.
There was a lot of discussion though about the psychoactive compounds making their way into wine and beer in ancient times, and certain visions perhaps being blah blah blah. But that wasn't his core point. His core point was that there were certain contemporaneous books that could have been in the Bible that ended up being excluded, that had a really interesting take on certain things.
Yep.
But also one of the core things I got out of it was he was going back to, I don't think it was the Greek, I think it was the Aramaic. Is that
Aramaic? Yep.
Mm-hmm. Aramaic? Yep. Aramaic?
Yep.
So predates the Greek versions of the Bible. Is that right? Yep. I don't know. This is how unschooled I am. But he was suggesting that if you look at certain entries of both what we consider the Bible, but also books that didn't make it in the Bible, Jesus on multiple occasions said, it's not just me that is the Son of God. You're all the Son of God. You're all divine.
Yep.
And that was one of the moments when, and this is why it's so interesting discussing how we get to where we get to with faith. But for me, that was one of the moments going, oh, hold on. And I pulled out my Zen book and I was looking at the Zen book and I'm like, so for me, that was weirdly enough, I think he was suggesting that means Christians aren't right about what Jesus said. But for me, it was a way back into Christianity. Yeah. Because I was like, that really echoes with me.
Yep.
So it's funny, isn't it? Like
it is.
The historic debate, that door can swing both ways.
Totally. Because then there's the whole thing of, we're adopted as sons of God.
Yeah.
So is there a divine in that? So there's, I think which comes to our point really, I think in this conversation, which is get into it.
Yeah.
Like just
figure it out for yourself.
Explore it. Go and have a look. What does this say? What does this religion say? How does that work? That spiritual journey is as important as our physical journey and mental agility and all these different aspects of life. And it's often underrated, I think.
I completely agree. I think when we spoke about physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, I'm sure there's somewhere missing. I think of them as overlapping Venn diagrams. Yeah. And if you can, it's a lot of Venn diagrams, I know. But if you
there's a lot there.
And I mean that in multiple ways. I mean that they are codependent and they interact.
Yeah.
But I also mean that, as we touched on earlier, sometimes you're going to miss a gym session because, catching up with that friend is really important. Or sometimes you might have that glass of wine with grandpa because he's not going to be around forever. Or,
totally.
You know what I mean? So when I think about them overlapping, there's also a degree of balance and give and take between them.
For sure.
But if you can be aware of and have some mindful, conscious, thoughtful approach to them, then you're in a good spot.
Yeah, totally. And it is, we're complex and we're integrated, and we've got spiritual things, physical things, and emotional things, and all sorts of stuff going in. Makes us human.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you want to be complicated and complex.
That's good.
Like the alternative sounds really boring.
Pretty boring. Might bring us to an end, I think.
It's probably a good note to end on.
It is.
Yeah.
Hey, Josh, love hanging out with you.
Likewise.
You're a brother, and it's just been great to see you. Enjoyed having lunch with you and catching up. Thanks for coming down again. And great to do this collab. I really enjoyed it. It's great.
I thank you so much.
We're going to work out how to do it on YouTube, so it's collabs, and I don't know how that's all going to work.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll make that happen.
We'll figure it out. Thank you so much for having me. I love spending time. Gorgeous lunch with you and Helen, and it's just so much fun hanging out.
It's very nice.
We keep chatting.
Always joy in conversation. Always get challenged, mate. Look at you, looking so young and healthy and fit.
Mate, you're so kind. I love hanging out with you.
Good to see you, Josh. Thanks.
Likewise. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us at the Lead Well, Live Well vodcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you want to know more about what we're all about, you can find us at leadwelllivewell.com.au.